now we are going to talk about Joe Biden's speech. Like first, let's talk about just briefly talk about Kamala Harris's speech. I mean, it was fairly standard. I mean, standard platitudes, standard like here's my life story, vote for me, that kind of thing. And like it wasn't it wasn't shitty, right? But, it's just fairly standard. Relatively substanceless, or nah, I can't speak today. But yeah, but Joe Biden's speech pleasantly surprised me. Like,
How much of this we're gonna watch? It was almost half an hour from what I remember.
yeah. But like I found a highlight reel of a few important points.
Oh, great.
And we're going to cover this clip by clip because it shows it in multiple different clips, and it clearly divides it out. And so like again, like it wasn't really substantive as far as like his solutions, except when he talks about how he wants to deal with COVID. Like he talked about a mask mandate, and he talked about making tests like available to everyone, and with immediate results, rather than like some people have to wait like a week to get the results. I've heard. It is filled with some standard neoliberal foreign policy talking points. Just like a lot of these other speeches were. But like I said, like it does a really good job at really like showing what where Trump went wrong with a lot of these very important issues. Like he uses the phrase "a perfect storm" to talk about like two or four major crises crises at the same time. He talked about Black Lives Matter. He talked about COVID itself. We have the worst pandemic in 100 years. He talked about the economic crisis that was caused by COVID, something that was oddly mentioned very few times compared to other stuff. And then he also talked about climate change. So we're going to go to this. We're going to go to this highlight reel. I'm going to pull it up. It's from it's from a YouTube channel called Indian Express Online.
History has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm. The worst pandemic in over 100 years. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s. And the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change. So the question for us is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be. All elections are important. But we know in our bones this one is more consequential.
In those like sports movies where the team is like, it's before their last game and they're all down and the coach has to like give them a rousing speech. That's what it sounds like.
Kind of. Yeah, I'll give you that. But yeah, like Joe Biden, does a good job at laying out what these problems are. Malcolm, are you still there?
I was just about to ask.
I'm still here.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, he does a good job at laying out the different problems that the biggest problems that we have. And in other parts of the speech, he really does a good job at showing how Trump has failed in these areas. And all of these areas, even with racial justice, which Joe Biden himself is not really great with, he does all of these issues, he is to some degree or another better than Trump on. You know what I mean? So
I get.
they're all they all deal with
lesser of two
bread and
evils.
butter type issues. I'd say.
And this is and I know that this is a pedantic point I'm about to make, but it doesn't matter whether or not we're ready to deal with climate change. It's here, and if we don't do something soon, it's going to be too late.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
definitely.
agree.
Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Have you seen a video like with Mike Pence talking about red meat? Like, I
Oh my
got some red
God.
meat for you.
They're gonna
Yeah,
take away my
He's
meat.
so uncharismatic.
yeah,
It's amazing. I'm actually like fascinated by how uncharismatic Mike Pence is.
Yeah, he's just as extreme as Trump, which
yeah,
fascinates me. Is like, some people say like, oh, Mike Pence would be better than Trump. I doubt he would.
yeah. He wouldn't. He's Trump's yes man.
Yeah,
He's definitely there to ensure that no one tries to, remove Trump too much because, I don't know what the exact word for it would be. Trump knew what he was doing when he got a more extreme, uncharismatic guy to be the guy who would replace him.
Yeah,
let's go to the next highlight that the video has.
This president on the facts. 5 million Americans infected by COVID-19. More than 170,000 Americans have died. By far the worst performance of any nation on earth. More than 50 million people have filed for unemployment this year. More than 10 million people are going to lose their health insurance this year. Nearly 1 in 6 small businesses have closed this year. And this president, if he's reelected, you know what will happen. Cases and deaths will remain far too high. More mom and pop businesses will close their doors, and this time for good. Working families will struggle to get by. And yet the wealthiest 1% will get tens of billions of dollars in new tax breaks.
yeah. He does talk on wealth disparities and inequality in America. So I
Yeah.
do feel a chance with gaining more so the vote that more so want to have more taxes for the rich.
Yeah, and he's getting more into like why like our economy is not as great as like Trump says it is. Like
Yeah.
I mean, like even before COVID,
Mhm.
a lot of these realities were very much a thing, like even before they were amplified through COVID.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important for the Democrats to really lean on COVID. Everyone remembers when Donald Trump said, "I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any support." But 175,000 people dead from this pandemic that need to spiral out the way it did. That might be enough to lose support.
Yeah. It's not like Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, like obviously he didn't start the pandemic and he didn't bring it to
Right.
America, but his inability to handle it certainly.
I mean, he
Yeah.
denied that it was a problem until like March or even later.
Yeah.
Yeah, about March 13th.
March
Mhm.
13th is when quarantine started. He started taking it a little bit more seriously, like maybe.
Wait, no,
so
March
before that.
11th. March 11th.
Okay. I
Yeah,
mean,
March 11th he started.
I mean, I don't know. It all seems to.
the difference of 2 days under quarantine isn't very much.
Yeah. But yeah, like that, he's starting in that clip to use Bernie type rhetoric. Yeah. Like if we just get past if we're able to like get past the record and like what he would actually do for president, like if we just like went into this knowing nothing about Joe Biden, we just knew what we believed in, and we were hearing Joe Biden say this. This would be, and like some people, like especially like the average like uneducated voters who don't know much about Joe Biden, they hear him make this rhetoric and they're like, wow, this guy, I think like has the right idea of what needs to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's something that Bernie Sanders really showed is that if you mention numbers to the American people, it won't just go over their heads. They'll get the message a lot better. And I think Joe Biden is really utilizing that.
Yeah, and he was not using like any like high, highly educated lingo. He was
Yeah, it was like kind of like fireside chats, like FDR used to do, like speaking to the common man or woman.
Yeah, and that's what like made Bernie like as successful as he was with like what he was able to do as far as like selling the policies. He was able to market his message to people who who understood the problems of the country because they were living them, but they were not like these super highly educated people who understood all the big fancy language, right? Like Bernie was able to use smaller words to describe his policies and put it in ways that they could understand. And I think Joe Biden does this pretty well in this clip.
They still speak at a higher reading level than Donald Trump.
Yeah, definitely. That's fair.
Yeah. So let's go to the next highlight.
Get our economy back on track. We will never get our kids safely back in schools. We'll never have our lives back until we deal with this virus. The tragedy of where we are today is it didn't have to be this bad. Just look around. It's not this bad in Canada or Europe or Japan or almost anywhere else in the world. And the president keeps telling us the virus is going to disappear. He keeps waiting for a miracle. Well, I have news for him. No miracle is coming. We lead the world in confirmed cases. We lead the world in deaths. Our economy is in tatters, with Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American communities bearing the brunt of it. And after all this time, the president still does not have a plan. Well, I do. If I'm your president, on day one, we'll implement the national strategy I've been laying out since March. We'll develop and deploy rapid tests with results available immediately. We'll make the medical supplies and protective equipment that our country needs. And we'll make them here in America, so we will never again be at the mercy of China or other foreign countries in order to protect our own people. We'll make sure our schools have the resources they need to be open, safe, and effective. We'll put politics aside. We'll take the muzzle off our experts so the public gets the information they need and deserve. Honest, unvarnished truth. They can handle it. We'll have a national mandate to wear masks, not as a burden, but as a patriotic duty to protect one another.
I think that it would especially speak to a lot of Trump supporters who enjoyed the America First narrative.
Yeah. And also, like, yeah, I think that is definitely the most substantive that the DNC had gotten. You know, like he really did.
Specific.
Yeah, he got really specific about what he wanted to do. We're going to like make supplies for our recovery, for our COVID recovery here in America. That alludes to like his plan that he unveiled not too long ago, his Buy America plan. You know, be a little bit more protectionist with trade, and that will help with jobs. And you know, he talked about having a national mask mandate. He talked about you know making testing accessible to everyone, as well as like access to results immediately. And overall, like I said, like he really illustrated like how terribly Trump handled this crisis.
Yeah, and it can relate to a lot of people personally, because many people have family members and people themselves who are affected by it, versus rather than a racist, sexist, homophobic Trump tweet that goes past the news cycle. COVID is something that will be instilled in people's minds for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Like that is definitely a good strategy. If you just run on the policy and like you actually run on the things that actually matter to the American people, rather than just saying, oh, Trump likes to tweet a lot. You know, oh, look at this buffoon. Yeah.
Biden is really good at mourning with the American people, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate because, he's had a lot of personal tragedy in his life and everything that's made him good at that. But now it's really helpful to his campaign.
Yeah, that seemed to be like a general theme as well with the DNC. It's just like the theme of like him having a past history of suffering. Like he knows what it's like to be down in the dumps with the American people. And I think that's definitely very appealing to some people. Like I was saying that, like, while the media was attacking Bernie for seeming angry, like in curmudgeon-y, like that is more appealing to the American people because that's how the rest of America is feeling right now. Talking about Joe Biden's personal history of suffering, I think really does have that, like this. Let's not sugarcoat it. Things are in the shitter now. Ready to go to the next highlight?
Sure.
Yep.
And we will deal with climate change. It's not only a crisis, it's an enormous opportunity. An opportunity for America to lead the world in clean energy and create millions of new, good-paying jobs in the process. And we can pay for these investments by ending loopholes, unnecessary loopholes, and the president's $1.3 trillion tax giveaway to the wealthiest 1% and the biggest, most profitable corporations, some of which do not pay any tax at all. Because we don't need a tax code that rewards wealth more than it rewards work. I'm not looking to punish anyone. Far from it. But it's long past time the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations in this country paid their fair share.
I do agree on his climate change plan more so. But the thing is, I feel he needs to be more specific about kind of how he's going to introduce it into our economy.
Yeah.
Definitely. The money set aside in his climate plan is only about 1% of what all experts say it's going to take to really curb climate change. It is a lot bigger than what Trump has, but in the spirit of what we were discussing earlier, there still needs to be some pressure put on him in this area.
Definitely, and more so kind of work with the business community.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like he touches on something that I really like. He touches on like what I really love about things like the Green New Deal, because it really because we're investing in green infrastructure, and at the same time we're going to have all of these new jobs. Like, think about the inevitable patents and like the new technologies that are going to come out of green energy. And I definitely agree with the sentiment that dealing with the climate crisis is a real opportunity for us economically. You know what I mean?
I think sentiment
definitely connect to our economy.
Yeah, sentimentally, I agree with everything he says.
Yeah, and he wasn't being a deficit hawk and try to say how are you going to pay for it? He's saying he started laying out in a very Bernie-like fashion how he was going to pay for it. Like, we're going to have the wealthy start paying their fair share. He talked about the Trump tax cuts back in 2017. Which Democrats have voted for tax cuts for the rich before, but in this when he actually when it went through the Senate, all the Democrats voted against it. So they were really bad. Yeah, I think the only person who had actually approved of them wasn't even in the Senate at the time, but Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, when Trump name dropped his tax cuts and during the State of the Union, she gave him a standing ovation. It was just
One small thing, I think it says a lot about the state of our politics that when a politician lays out their plan clearly and concisely, it's seen as being in the style of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
But I do feel
Very
that
true.
there should be a significant portion that comes from our military budget too, because while they're
Absolutely.
talking about the rich, we need to also talk about the military as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd say it needs the budget needs to be slashed by 50%,
At
40% at least. 50% I think is definitely.
Yeah, we would still have the biggest military by far, bigger than the next several countries combined at 50% of what we have.
Maybe not combined, but definitely the biggest.
It is. It's the next few countries. I mean, now it's
next 10,
something.
right?
Now it's like the next 10 or 12 combined right now. If we slashed it in half, it would still be the next maybe 3 to 5. I don't know exactly.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, now let's go to the next one.
I have to do it alone because I'll have a great vice president at my side. Senator Kamala Harris. She's a powerful voice for this nation. Her story is the American story. She knows about all the obstacles thrown in the way of so many in our country. Women, black Americans, South Asian Americans, immigrants, the left out and the left behind. But she's overcome every obstacle she's ever faced. No one's been tougher on the big banks and on the gun lobby. No one's been tougher in calling out the current administration for its extremism, its failure to follow the law, its failure to simply tell the truth.
And like, yeah, I said, like, no one's been tougher on the big banks. You know, like, and Kamala Harris talked about this in her
Yeah.
speech. Like,
Wait,
you were the person.
Didn't she refuse to prosecute Steve Mnuchin?
Yeah, we talked about that last week.
Oh.
You know, because like Steve Mnuchin was a Dem donor at the time, and you know, like he donated some money to Kamala Harris's office. She didn't prosecute for the shit he pulled that contributed to the recession.
And that's just blatant corruption. I mean, there's no other label for it.
Yeah. And next clip.
One more urgent task on us. Will we be the generation that finally wipes out the stain of racism from our national character? I believe we're up to it. I believe we're ready. Just a week ago yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the events in Charlottesville. Close your eyes. Remember what you saw on television. Remember seeing those neo-Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists coming out of fields with lighted torches, veins bulging, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. Remember the violent clash that ensued between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. It was a wake-up call for us as a country, and for me, a call to action. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run, because my father taught us that silence was complicity, and I could never remain silent or complicit. At the time, I said we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are.
There's a lot to unpack in that last little last clip. So he talks about racism, everything that he says about the issue, I agree with. But I think what he's talking about is mostly restricted to a very social level, as far as like racism is concerned.
Yeah, it's more so extremist level. Like most of the
Yeah, he mentioned Charlottesville and stuff.
Yeah. And like I said, it's mostly on a social level. He's mostly talking about how our rhetoric influences them rather than how our actual system deals with racism.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And I wrote this down. Didn't want to forget this. He opened with, will we be the generation that finally wipes the stain of racism from this country or something? I don't know to what generation he's referring. He's certainly not in our generation or most other generations. He's of the generation of the Dixiecrats. He worked with Strom Thurmond, no less, as well as other segregationists to write horrible.
And the crime bill, like we mentioned earlier.
Yes, I mean,
1994 crime bill.
He's part of the reason why racism is still alive and well in this country.
And also, since
and he has not apologized for that.
Yeah, like he's still.
And he just denies it, which is
crime bill. Yeah.
I mean, an apology would be something. He could say, "Oh, I've changed my mind on this issue, and I don't know, I may or may not believe him," but he won't even do that.
Yeah, that would be something. But since he's talking about it at he had in that whole segment, he was talking about racism at a strictly social level, and he's talking about wiping the stain of racism from our country. If we're just keeping it to a social level, no, that's not going to be done for centuries to come. There's always going to be at least one asshole for a long time. And so, that's just the harsh reality of it. It would be better, and I think it would be much more practical to try to root racism out on a systemic level, rather than on a social one. Because I think that even though it is still a difficult issue to deal with, relatively speaking, it would be easier to do that rather than then try to do it from a strictly social level, because you're not going to get rid of racism on a social level for a very long time. And also I think politicians actively try to keep the conversation of racism at a social level, because they're, like we mentioned, Joe Biden especially is responsible for much of the systemic racism that still occupies much of our society.
That being said, the sentiment I agree with.
Like, yeah, the sentiment of everything he was saying, as far as like where racism goes. There's another thing I wanted to talk about with this thing, but like everything like concerning racism, I agreed with. You know, like we all lived in Charlottesville at one point. We saw that.
We were all here
happen.
when it happened, right?
Yeah, I was here. I
Yeah.
saw where the girl was hit by a car on CNN.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the middle of downtown. That's where I am right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit further outside of Charlottesville, but Charlottesville is like where I go to school. That's where we go shopping. That's where we like whenever when we say go, like, all right, get ready, we're going to town. We're talking about Charlottesville, so like we all know that community very deeply. So
I'm a block and a half, 2 blocks away from the mall where all that shit went down. I mean, it's very much still in our consciousnesses.
The other thing from that segment that he was talking about, and this is something that I think is very problematic about the Biden campaign in general, is he keeps on using the phrase like restore the soul of this nation, as if like things were completely hunky-dory before Trump got here.
Right.
It was just status quo.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same kind of thing as like make America great again. Like it's not clear what America he's referring to or what the greatness is. It's the same sort of thing here. Democrats just like to pretend that Trump is, the reason our country is so crushed. But he's a symptom of a much larger issue. Really of much larger issues.
Yeah. And Trump is not just some aberration that came out of nowhere. And that really gets to the heart of the problem with the Biden campaign.
Yes, there's many Trumps in the world and in America like this.
Yeah, and since the Biden presidency, I don't see, at least at the moment, because FDR was not really was very much like more conservative going into office, but he had a change of heart. He was considered a traitor to his class. But yeah, like as of right now, I don't see any of that kind of thing coming from the Biden campaign. So like that actually deals with the issues that led to Trump's election in the first place. So like I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere along down the road we have like a right-wing demagogue using populist rhetoric as a weapon to rise in power, and we end up with someone who's worse than Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens at all. And then, like I posted on Instagram not too long ago, when that happens, the establishment is going to be very nostalgic about Trump, the same way they are about Bush now.
I mean, we'll see. I really like to believe that Trump is so far outside of normal that won't happen, but you might be right.
I mean, if it happens with Trump, it can happen with anybody else. So.
Yeah, that's very true.